They say that retail is a numbers game, but what numbers actually matter? Welcome back to the 2 Cents Podcast. My name is Brianna Deculus, and today we're diving into the topic data that separates CPG winners from losers because numbers don't lie. With our guest, James Ely, a long term CPG executive and veteran that has worked for some of the most respected companies in the industry like P&G and Johnson & Johnson. James, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
I am so pumped for this show. We should have recorded our prep call as the podcast because we almost went to church. So, James, do me a favor, please. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and share some of the incredible parts of your background and experience with folks?
Thanks, Ruben. Happy to. So, as you all stated, I'm James Ely. I have been in the CPG industry for 37 years now. Started in 1988 with Procter& Gamble. I went on after P&G to work at Johnson & Johnson for 21 years and have had a lot of experience working across a lot of brands between grocery and health and beauty care. A lot of experience with major customers. Uh, was started in regional food, was on the ground at Target for a few years, ran our business at CVS, and then in my final years at J&J, my last 8 years or so, not counting the last year, I ran the Walmart business for J&J, and it was a great time. So a lot of experience with a lot of brands, a lot of big customers, and I tell you, I love retail, I love CPG, and happy to be here and hopefully can share some insight.
You and I go way back, tons of stories. We won't get into all of them here, but do me a favor and share like one thing that you're most proud of over all the years of your career and being a part of the CPG community.
Ruben, this feels like a setup. This feels like a setup. So anybody who's watching this, who knows me from the last 3 years, they're gonna know what I'm gonna say. I will tell you the thing I'm proudest of is what we did collectively as a team running the Walmart business for the 8 years I was there. Um, it wasn't just about business results; it was also about impact on people. Um, I'll start by saying the thing that's going to grow on my gravestone that everybody teases me about, but I'm happy to say that in those 8 years, from the quarter I got there, we delivered 27 consecutive quarters of POS growth. Now, to be fair, we didn't restate the data. Brands were sold, brands were bought, but when you looked at any individual quarter and measured it against the prior quarter, for 27 consecutive quarters, we grew that business, and that was up through COVID. But I'm also proud of the team, the culture we built. We were a net importer and exporter of talent. People wanted to be on that team. We really focused on culture. We really focused on trying to understand the customer. And I think the biggest thing was, as a leadership team, we always focused on making sure the team had what it needed to win. It was about enabling the team's success. Not a lot of bureaucracy, not a lot of hierarchy, not a lot of BS. It was really about how do we enable this team to do its best for the company and for this customer. And we got results. And so it was fun. I will tell you, my last day there, the day I walked out of the building, I'm probably ashamed to admit it, but nobody was there. It was during COVID. Went to clean out my office. And I'll tell you, I sat in the car and cried for 5 minutes because it was such an experience, and I hated to let it go, but it was time. But that's what I'm proudest of, man. What we did in
Listen,
Arkansas.
Listen, I shared a part of that time when me and my family moved down, and it was some of the best years of my life. I fell in love with Northwest Arkansas. People know I'm a big Walmart fan. I think the only thing I've done in 27 consecutive quarters is probably gain weight. But overall, man,
I'm not
that's
touching that.
that's, that's a remarkable achievement, and I appreciate you sharing that, right, for the audience to hear that. James, do me a favor, man. Tell me about a brand that folks would likely consider a Me Too brand, but they really landed the consumer insight and won in their particular category.
I'll tell you that the biggest example of that comes to mind for me is Bevel. Um,
Oh, oh, okay, that's a good
you
one.
know, Gillette has ruled shaving for decades, right? And this brother, Tristan Walker, had the nerve to think he could come into the category with something special. And he had something special. What he had was insight. He knew that there was an unmet need for men of color in this space. And a safety razor, a single edge or double edged razor, isn't new innovation. They've been around for, over 100 years. But as the category had grown and as products have been introduced, I think that somewhere someone didn't care or lost the insight around what it means to shave, you know, for men of color, right? We have coily hair. The follicle oftentimes twists back into the skin, causing hair bumps and irritation. And shaving can make it worse because as more and more innovation was delivered in the category with double-edged and triple-edged and quadruple-edged blades, what they missed was that when you have multiple blades, the first blade will pull the hair and cut it. And as the follicle is going back, the second blade comes behind and cuts it again. And so then the follicle ends up being cut so cleanly and it rests below your skin. Now, if you've got straight hair, that's not an issue. The follicle is going to grow back out. But if you've got a curved follicle, once that thing starts to grow, it may not be able to break the skin, goes back into the skin, and you end up with hair bumps, inflamed skin. And that's the problem for men of color when they're shaved. So Tristan had this insight that, look, here's an unmet need. We have a particular need based on the physiology of how our hair grows. And he tapped into that and brought back to market basically a product that had existed for ages, but no one was thinking about it relative to it satisfying this unmet need. And so I'm sure when he launched, people probably scoffed at him and said, oh, they're not going to do anything. But it blew up because, again, he launched based on the insight. He understood the science of what the consumer needed. He understood how his product could deliver on a benefit. And as a result, they grew. And guess what? Ended up getting bought by P&G. So I've used Bevel for years. Um, I will tell you, I started using it. I was a little uncomfortable with the weight of the razor itself, and so I shied away from it. And I'll tell you this: here's something else too. He pays attention to his business. I ended my subscription within a few days. He was looking at my profile on LinkedIn. That was not a coincidence. But I went back eventually, got comfortable with it, and I'll tell you, haven't had a problem since. Skin's not perfect, but it's not what it was. And so, again, this guy understood his consumer. He understood what they needed. He understood how to position something that, in its own right, may not have really been innovative because they already existed, but he figured out a way to innovate on it. And look at him today.
I love that. That's a good story. And you just
Yeah.
educated me. I don't know anything about shaving, but okay.
Well, and what I love about it is, and this is where, you guys we've talked a lot about, founders brands.
Mhm.
So many brands today put forward the face of the founder and their story as the reason to buy a product. But at the end of the day, I might like Ruben. I might like Ruben and what he represents. But if Ruben's product doesn't meet my need, if it doesn't deliver a solution to something that I need, well, Ruben's product's not going to be around long, right? And so, you know, Tristan Walker's name was always associated with the brand, but it was as much about his product and what it was doing and the benefit, if not more, than it was about him. And so many people today go out and think that their brand should succeed just because they've got this face or because of, oh, I had a hard life and I ended up making these special cookies. Are they really special? What makes your chocolate chip better than somebody else's chocolate chip?
Right.
You really got to look at the end of the day. This has been true before I started, but definitely over the 37 years I've been doing this. One of the first things I learned when I was at Procter & Gamble, it was about understanding or being able to articulate features, benefits, and addressing unmet consumer needs. What makes your product different from everyone else's product? What are you delivering that the consumer can't go get from another brand that's already on the market? How is it superior? How is it more beneficial? How is it faster acting, more efficacious? Is it delivering something new and novel?
Yeah.
But if it's just your pretty face, I don't know that that's sustainable.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ruben.
No, I was just going to say product market fit. That's exactly what you're talking about, right?
Definitely. So you hinted at something, James. So I kind of want to lean in on something that you said. So when you were at J&J, or you were at P&G, and these big players, how did they ensure that their data storytelling resonated with the retailers and the buyers at those retailers, those must wins, to make sure that they were able to secure that shelf space?
Oh wow, so many ways. I think there's the easy answer, and then there's this longer, more institutional answer. The easy answer is number one, in both organizations, they always started with the consumer. I can tell you about so many times, and look, and I saw it. I had a closer look at it in J&J because I would say when I was at P&G, I was in sales, I was in the field. I didn't spend a lot of time in the internal organization. In the 13 years I was there, 10 were in the field, two internal, and then my last year I was working on a special project. Really grew up in J&J, went from manager to vice president, internal, external. So I got a chance to see how the machinery worked even more closely at J&J. But in both instances, they always rooted their innovation in what we were just talking about, a clear understanding of the consumer. And that in its own way requires data, right? It may not be numbers all of the time. Sometimes it's qualitative data. It's data that's gleaned from focus groups. It's data that's gleaned from uh, feedback that comes from consumers through your customer service line. It is surveys, right? But then also it's the data associated with the development of the product, right? Testing the product to ensure that it does what it says, that it's as good as or better than what else is out there, right? But then it was how they pulled the story together to make it easy for us as salespeople to then go in and share that and explain that with the customer. And when I would say the difference in my time at P&G and J&J is I'll call it analog versus digital. I
Mm,
started at P&G in 1988, and we would get our sales materials in the mail, and you'd get a binder every quarter that would lay out all the sales plans. And there was just reams of data and information, right, to go with what would later be the presentation. They made sure they armed you with every insight possible so that you could go in and sell that innovation. And then when I got to J&J, more digital, it was, 2001, more things coming us online. Again, no shortage of data and content and insight on the consumer, on the market, even on the customer, and how the customer was performing and how they matched up against the opportunity so that we could go and effectively sell. But at the end of the day, no matter what you provide, you have got to have some data about the consumer, their preference, their needs, and why this product is important to launch.
absolutely.
That's super powerful, right? And obviously in those big engines, right? We had the power of retail, Nielsen, IRI, and all those things. But now they have Chat GPT, right? You'll be surprised the kind of data, right? Some of that um, quantitative data to go with the qualitative in terms of being able to put together a great story, regardless of the size of your business. So, but I love that perspective.
Yeah,
Love it.
and they had
Absolutely.
the machinery built behind it. Look, I'm going to tell you, between both organizations, you couldn't get a better set of marketers, right? I remember what was then called CMK at P&G, your the equivalent to what would we call them today? Um, Market research, right?
Market research.
you know, we had those people embedded, in the teams when we were in what was then customer strategy, or I think it was trade marketing when I was at Procter. But to be fair, they're large organizations, so they have the resource to be able to put bodies in place to go after data all day, every day, and come back and craft a story, to take, reams of data and cull it down into a really tight, concise story that then is able to be delivered to the retailer for easy translation. Because I think about smaller organizations, they may not have a CMK or MRD. So you have to think about being nimble in terms of as you're thinking about launching innovation, just the simple things again. How is this product delivering on some need for the consumer, an unmet need or a superior need? What market data do you have in your hands that can help you tell that story?
Absolutely.
And then have who know how to then sell with data. Again, 37 years, when I first started, we didn't have data. I think the only data we had when I started, I remember I started in Richmond, Virginia, in the beverage division in at Procter and Gamble, and the only data I ever saw was SAMI data. And SAMI, I don't remember what SAMI stood for, but it was just warehouse pools. We didn't have Nielsen and IRI. That didn't come along until 1994,
Three or
95
four. I
when I
think
was
it was
over
somewhere
there.
in that
Now,
ballpark. Yeah.
they might have had it internally, but in the field, like we didn't get computers until 1994.
Yeah.
I tell stories like this. I remember somebody saying to me once, "You're lying," when I was telling them just how different the world was when I started. No computers, no data. Um, but now that we have this data, you don't need a ton of it. It doesn't take a lot to tell a good story.
What do
But my
you
question would be,
What do you think the
people, the
blind
organization.
spot is? What do you think the blind spot is for the founders and the small brands that don't know what retail is looking for? What's that one key metric that they should be prioritizing? Because to your point, they don't have consumer researchers and insight data. They don't have any accessibility to a Nielsen or IRI. What's that one data point that they should be looking for that they need before they're ready to go pitch themselves to retail?
I think in the absence of historical sales data, if I were a buyer, the thing I would be listening for is just what I talked about earlier. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why your product, right? So, what do you have that you can bring in that demonstrates there is a need for your product?
Yeah,
Is there a study? Have you polled X thousands of consumers? I would tell you one of the ways that is becoming more and more prevalent for people to establish that data set is many people will launch their brand on e-commerce first. If you launch on an Amazon, you get a wealth of data there about
yep,
uh, consumer response and whether sales data, not just sales data, but also ratings and reviews and feedback from consumers. So I think there are ways to get data if you are data poor. The
mm-hmm.
question is, do you have the patience to go that route?
Yeah,
And so if you have launched first on Amazon, you probably are better suited to then be able to tell a story with data because you have garnered some data through that form of execution. If you're just coming straight to market, well, you got to really figure out how to tell that story and come with something compelling to make a retailer to say, yeah, I'm willing to give you a chance.
absolutely. And subscribe and save data is usually what I leverage and I push those founder and emerging brands to use when going to retail. It's first showing, hey, I've been able to build X amount of subscribers within 90 days of being live or 180 days of being live. But thank you so much for answering those questions. A lot of times I think that new to brand, new to market brands don't understand what to expect when going to a retailer and how buyers are. What are they anticipating? So thank you so much for that insight.
Brianna, it makes me think about Shark Tank. You watch Shark Tank on any night of the week, and you see it play out on Shark Tank. You have some people who come through and they're able to say to you, "Here's my idea. Here's how it's meeting a consumer need. Oh, I've got a direct to consumer approach." And I've generated this much in sales. Or I was able to get an X number store test in this retailer, and here's what I did in sales. And
Absolutely.
then you have others who say, no, you should buy my brand because I believe in it.
Mhm.
Believe in me. Believe in my idea. And that's not enough. That's not enough.
It's
You
you
got
telling
to
me
not.
you
have
telling me
something compelling.
you telling me empathy doesn't sell?
For some people, it might, depending on who you know.
Right.
But I would say 99.7% of us, empathy is not enough to launch and sell a brand.
100%. So, James, this is one of my favorite segments called My Two Cents, right? Where we talk a little bit about fact and a lot about an opinion. But I know with you, you're going to bring the data, you're going to bring the facts. And so I'm going to take you back a little bit. When I worked on your team in Arkansas on the Walmart team, we had the Fantastic Four metrics. We use that all the time to help us really understand where the business was going and what we should be doing and prioritizing. What to you is one or two of the most overrated metrics that people really obsess over and they probably shouldn't?
You're not going to like my answer.
Oh boy. Is it something that impacted my quarter?
No, it's nothing that impacted your quota. Well, you know what? That might be the one quota attainment because I used to hate quota because quota is manufactured, quota is given to you, and I get it. Someone gives you a target. Don't get me started on quota, but like I think they're all important, and here's why. I think it's important that anyone, regardless of the function you sit in, has an ability to be of two minds. You need to understand what's important to your function, but you need to understand what's important to the organization, right? And so, as a salesperson, I'm sitting here, and say supply chain comes through and decides to discontinue a tenth of the portfolio because those 10% of SKUs erode their supply chain performance. Well, I'm hot. Like, what? You're reducing SKUs? I need those SKUs. There's revenue attached to those SKUs. And so, as a salesperson, I might say your efficiency metric doesn't matter. That's short-sighted, right? You gotta look at the whole. You have to think about the fact that if you've got non-productive SKUs, they have an impact on your run times on your lines, overall operational efficiency. You got cash tied up in inventory, cash that can't be redeployed to put against marketing or put against customers or put into quality, whatever the case may be. One of the things about an organization is that the nature of having a multifunctional organization creates conflict, right? I care about sales, you care about profitability, you care about efficiency, you care about quality. I don't care about this, I don't care about, no, you got to care about all of it. That tension is meant to exist, because if everybody lined up just against one metric, that could be to the detriment of the entire organization. So if we just line up against top line, I can go sell, 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 but I may be selling more margin dilutive SKUs that impact the profitability of the company and the portfolio. So you have to look at all of them. Now, it may not be your job as the salesperson to understand every metric across the organization, but you have to understand the value that those metrics play for other parts so that you can work together effectively. And if you're a general manager of the business, you have to care about all of them, because they all come together to work across your P&L to help you deliver the results that you need. So I don't know that there is a metric that's overrated. It's just a matter of what may be more important to one function or one role versus another.
James, man, listen, I get it, but you're actually scaring my guests. Are you saying that he should be a PhD? Right? They should understand a lot about their business. They should understand, enough about the metrics so that they can make the best decisions possible. But I got to tell you, man, it's kind of hard, right, for them to really process it that way. But having said that, right, if there's not one metric to you that stands out that's most overrated, why don't you give me a metric that you would consider as important, that's underrated, that actually drives sales?
Okay. I could give you two that are underrated. I'll start with my first one. The first one is a hard one for an organization to see, but you need to be keenly aware of it, and that's retailer margin. One of the things that I think suppliers forget is that our customers are corporations just like we are, and they have metrics to deliver just like we do. And they have to explain to the street their performance just like we do.
Yeah.
And so you step back, and I've been in so many conversations in the past where we look at our portfolio efficiency, right? And let's say that you're launching a new product, and you know that your new product has to hit an internal hurdle of, I'll make it up, $2 million a year and a 60 margin. So you come with the item, and it's going to do 1.5 million at a 50 margin. You know not to even go into the room. Your general manager, your category lead, whatever you call that role internally, they're never going to let you present that item because of what it's going to do to the portfolio. So now let's stop for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You're a big CPG player. You generate a lot of dollars for a retailer. You move a lot of units. And the retailer has a margin of, let's just pick a number, 30 points, 30%. But you're big and important. So you're going to come in and bring in your 20 margin item and expect the retailer to support you because you're number one, because you're big. Yeah, you're also big and dilutive.
Mm-hmm.
You are working against the very metrics that buyer has to hit to support his or her organization. And so many times, I think companies get caught up in, well, I have to be priced here versus my competition. And, you know, you know what? That's great. Then you need to get your internal economics right so that you can launch and be competitive, but also deliver on what will make it easy for that buyer to say yes. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're coming in with a margin dilutive product, you are working against the very person that you need to support you. So retailer margin, see it all the time.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like you're spot on. I talk about that all the time, and I think that's the one single metric that's created the environment by which all of the indie brands are now flooding the categories and taking all of the share from a lot of the big brands. Right? I think you're spot on with that answer. I wish I had a jar and I'll drop 2 cents in it because I think you nailed that and hit it out the park.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
I had a second
Absolutely.
one too. Look, let me give you my second one. My second one, and this is for all the salespeople out there. Inventory. That's another one. You know, oftentimes we just want to sell, 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 load the customer up with product. You know, look, retailers are not here to be your warehouse.
Come on.
They want an efficient flow of product, right? And you know, I can say this, you know, having worked 8 years with Walmart, like you're not loading Walmart up with no inventory. You're just not. You know, they're looking at those
You're not loading
registers
up
because along the
Amazon
way,
with you're not loading up Amazon with a whole lot of inventory either. To be clear, they like it real tight, real tight, and
and
it's
so you need to understand the whole cycle. You need to understand how your demand is doing, how that demand will drive replenishment, right? How that replenishment impacts their inventory position, and how their inventory position then impacts your ability to move additional cases.
mm-hmm.
And oftentimes people are sitting at the end of a quarter and trying to figure out, you know, how to get the retailer to buy more and load them up. And it's like, well, have you looked at their inventory position? And if they want to be at X days of supply and you're at X plus, you know, 10 or X weeks of supply and you're at X plus 20, there's no motivation for them to buy you. They're just tying up cash.
Right.
You're creating inefficiency for them. And this is one thing I would say in smaller organizations who don't have a lot of data, who are constantly pushing, pushing, pushing to move product. They may not take enough time to understand the relationship between that sales drive and the impact on the retailer and their position they end up in relative to inventory, and then how that is prohibitive to what you want to do. Look, I think the best thing is for you to run a stable, demand driven business. If you want the cases to flow, focus on demand. Because if the consumer buys it, the retailer should replenish it. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times that they will come back and they'll tweak things. We know that there are times that they might tweak replenishment settings. You know, instead of triggering a resale at 2 pieces, maybe they change that setting to 1 piece, right? Because they've got things they've got to manage also. But ultimately, if you are running a good business focused on driving demand, the inventory should flow.
Absolutely. And the other thing I'll say is it's the brands that forget that hey, you might have contributed to why your product is so lean on inventory to begin with that retailer as well. You start changing products and you don't give that retailer enough lead time to go through a UPC change, packaging change, whatever the case may be. You can't be kicking and screaming because you're still trying to hit your quarter number, but also you decided to change something on week 10, right? So that
Yep.
definitely plays a part into that as well. You can't expect them to just have a magic wand and say, "I'm gonna open up the floodgates. Come drop off all your cases here." Like it don't work that way. So I think that's a perfect 2 cents to add to that as well. So thank you for that.
Well, I'll give you an example of that. Major brand restaging itself, redoes total brand architecture, went from old look to new look.
Mm-hmm.
Category leader, so tons of inventory because if you had a 16-foot shelf at this point, I kid you not, we're easily 8 feet of the section. Number one,
Whew.
so you're turning over the whole brand,
Mm-hmm.
and the goal was to limit the amount of markdowns applied to the old product and limit the amount of returns that came back on the old product. But nothing had been done to limit the amount of inventory that had gone out the door. And so we're thinking, well, how is this going to work?
Right.
You don't want to inventory down, you don't want to take it back. You kept shoving stuff out into the marketplace. There's a conflict here. And ultimately, I think they gave on the returns. They had to give on the returns because they needed to quickly get that inventory off the shelf to get the new product out. But again, it was they didn't understand the total ecosystem around inventory management, and it undermined the launch. Now they got to market. There were some other things that were problems with the launch that kind of held it back. But that was a big operational mess because not enough attention was paid to the inventory management of that launch.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah,
You're dropping
I, I,
gems.
yeah, yeah. Those were some spitfire answers, man. Powerful, powerful insight. And so, look, we're going to pivot to another segment here. I'm really excited about this. We sent some product out; it never made it, and sometimes things happen. But the blessing in that was that James was gracious enough to go out to retail and pick up the product. And while he was there, it gave him a chance to look at the full category and insight. And I think that's going to really add some really good flavor to this next segment that we call the shelf test. So I'm going to then hand it over now to Brianna, and I'm going to let her facilitate this with James because I think they're going to really blow your mind and how they look at products and think about the category as a whole. Brianna, I'll kick it to you.
Absolutely. So I'm super excited to start this segment because I think it's going to be fun. And James, I feel like you are the perfect partner to do this with. So I'd love for us to start with the whipped product, maybe. Yeah, you have that with you? Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
I do.
And so we both have the product. We're gonna talk about it, and I'm really excited. So we'll look at. I actually have the gold one. But we can talk about both of them, and we can even compare the classic as well. So, looking at this, I'd love for you to give us a live assessment of really the packaging, the pricing, the positioning, and then after that, we'll talk about what kind of grade we would give the product. And I'm happy that you have the classic versus the golden. And so, I'd love for us to also talk about the differences between those two and maybe what one is lacking.
Okay. So I got a bag here. And so I'm just gonna play from it. Like, oh look, what is this? Oh. All right. So if I were pulling it out the bag, there are a few things that hit me immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So the product is what first disclaimer. The opinions expressed here are not anyway. All right. So number one, you pull out the whipped product. This right, and so I see really novel product, looks like whipped cream. Um, it's sunscreen, so it's kind of cute, right? In terms of they've got a new form, a foam, a whip, and they're uh, selling it in the context of food. So kind of fun and whimsical, right? And maybe it's enough to draw you in at the shelf. But then when I pick it up, look, number one, you only have a few seconds with a consumer. And if I'm just looking at the front of the package, I get the brand, Vacation Classic. Whip is the product or the sub brand. That is the SPF 30, but I don't get a lot relative to claims. And if a consumer is walking down the aisle looking for a sun care product and she's scanning and she's reading packaging, why are you making it so hard for her to understand what this is and what it does? Literally, the only claims here would be, um, look, broad spectrum SPF 30, that's a feature. Sunscreen mousse, that's a feature. Okay, water resistant 80 minutes. Okay, that's probably your claim, right? But then you go down the aisle and you look at other products that are there, and they speak to things like being dermatologist tested or highlighting a an ingredient like the fact that they're oxybenzone free. One of the best examples of claims on the front of packaging that I saw was CeraVe, and they had blends seamlessly into skin with a lightweight, non-greasy feel,
Mm-hmm.
suitable for sensitive skin.
Mm-hmm.
And I
And
don't know if
usually the last one is no white cast. That's usually that ending claim that you see, especially with CeraVe. They'll always call out that they don't have that white cast finish. So it doesn't leave
okay,
that pasty look on your skin.
since you said that, that was one of the things I thought about, right? I see this foam, I see this very, I don't know if
Mhm.
this is lightweight, I don't know if it's thick. And so, me personally, as a person of color, I would look at this and say, I don't know if I want to use that because I'm not sure if it will leave white casting. Now,
Mhm.
to your point, one of the items that I did see at the shelf that did an excellent job conveying claims in that sense was Black Girl sunscreen lotion for face and body, right?
Yes.
I think it's
Yes.
12%. let me look at a picture real quick. I took a picture of it. It is, yeah, black girl sunscreen.
Yep.
And it was great because as you look at what they have here, moisturizing sunscreen lotion. Okay, moisturizing for
Mm-hmm.
face and body. Spectrum SPF 30. Okay, everybody else has that. It's featured. Infused with jojoba and avocado. Oh, wow, we're unique. So right there on the ingredient story on the front, on the claim, I've got a unique ingredient.
Yep.
Water resistant, 80 minutes. Okay, that's standard for these type of products. And then at the bottom, ultra sheer, no white residue, fragrance free.
Yep.
They've got a package that's working very hard for them at first glance. Now, so as I step back, the other thing that was interesting about seeing this item in the context of the shelf versus Ruben sending it to me in a bag is that I got a chance to see that it was $22.
$22.
$22.
Expensive.
Yeah, and this packaging isn't working. You've told me nothing about why this is important. So let's go back to our prior conversation. It's not that different from, hey, buy my product because I'm a celebrity or buy my product because of my hard story.
Mm-hmm.
This is buy my product because I'm a whip. Okay, I don't know. Like, why do I need a whip? I okay, and certainly, why do I need to buy a whip at $22? That's not really telling me much about what it's going to do for me, aside from the fact that it's a whip.
So I think it's important that we call out one thing right here, particularly in the conversation. What retailer did we get this from? We got this from Target.
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 It wasn't
My,
Walmart. It wasn't
yeah, my
Amazon.
retailer wouldn't have had that. My retailer would not never bring that to the shelf with all those.
But I bring that up to say the positioning at Target, what they do particularly well is like this aesthetic pull, right? So these are items that give the aesthetic pull of, well, this is cutesy. I'm gonna put this in my beach bum photo dump on my Instagram, right? So lack of claims, lack of education, lack of benefit, if we're being honest, because 30 SPF is not that high compared to what you see when you're standing at shelf. Now, it doesn't mean that we actually need more than 30, but also that's all you have is 30. That's really like the only true benefit on the front of this package is that it says 30
Front.
as yeah, on the front. And
Now
so
on the back, they
let's
do
flip it to the
list.
back. Yep.
Okay, for true connoisseurs of leisure, oxybenzone free.
Mm-hmm.
I can't pronounce that free. Vegan, cruelty free, PEG and paraben free, dermatologist tested.
Not approved, but
I still
tested.
and I still don't see what makes this then different. Maybe the vegan. And so if that's the case, if that's the big differentiator, why isn't it somewhere on the front of the label? And it's so
Right.
small, you make me read. And so if I'm a consumer, again, look, Target is a great place for a discovery trip,
Yep.
right? You've got your destination, you've got routine, but there are some retailers that it's all about discovery. I'm going to take the time to go in and browse. And if you've got a consumer who has the time, the luxury to leisurely, as they say, browse the products on the aisle, who's going to take the time to try to understand this and say, okay, it's cute because it's a whip and it's vegan. I just don't know how this is any different from anything else on the
Are
shelf.
you buying
Now,
this?
what's it?
Are you buying this once you turn the can around? Would you still buy it after you read the back?
No, it's not. No, not for $22. It's not that differentiated. Now, the other thing on the claims that's really interesting. So I pulled up their baseline on
Mm-hmm.
Target.com.
Mm-hmm.
They've done a great job on their baseline with this, right?
Yep.
Leisure enhancing sunscreen from the legendary vacation of Miami. I don't know if that's meaningful yet. With coconut, banana, and aloe vera. Okay, maybe that's the draw. Natural
Where's that
ingredients.
at? Where is that
This is
at?
on that's their vacation class. That's their classic.
No, that's what I'm saying. Where is that at on the can? Where the talk
Well,
of
it's not on the can.
right? Nowhere.
That's just what I'm saying. So on their base product, they've done a great job of some sort of architecture to lay out something appealing from a claims perspective. And it makes me say, well, did the same team work on this? And did you even look at your own packaging when you designed this new packaging? Um, and look, they spent a lot of time or real estate. I mean, this is easily
75% of the real estate.
75% of the package is spent on
Yep.
the form and the brand and the sub brand.
Yep.
And I would argue, is there a better way to have architected this label so that you had more claims and a reason for being? What makes your product unique versus others versus it just being a whip? But even again, showing the whip raises its own questions because as I look at this, well, how is this going to go on? Is it too thick? Is it too thin? Is it going to leave white casting? Um, so, and then you asked about the second item, the glow. I mean, the only thing that's different between the two is the color and the fact that they've got glow here. But
Right.
even with glow mean I mean, what does it mean?
Literally, what
It
does it mean?
okay. The classic whip you love now with shimmer. Okay, so look, consumers are smart. I'm sure there's somebody who's going to look at this, understand what a whip does. They're going to get it. But at the same time, in a sea of hundreds of other items, your packaging has to work to say, choose me versus choosing this
Literally,
item.
choose me,
So,
love me, buy me, even though I cost more, right? Like from like Grey's Anatomy, right? But one of the things I think about too here, right? And you hit on this, and I want your perspective. So Vacation is the actual brand, Vacation sunscreen. Now it looks like they're playing on, or they would hope to have hung their hat on the legacy of Vacation skincare, their baseline. Now, me as a female, I go to the beach every summer. I lay out all the time. It's my thing. I've never heard of Vacation sunscreen ever. So it's not actually this, even having Vacation at the top is not hanging their hat on anything, like as if Neutrogena would have had their name at the top of this, right? Well, now the brand recognition of their baseline is at least helping me want to pick up this product and be willing to pay $22 for it, right? And so I think that that's the other miss here, is that your baseline does not have enough brand equity to create a subline where you now have, again, to your point, 75% of the packaging of Classic Whip. I'm sorry. I don't know what classic whip is, especially not in sunscreen settings, right? So I feel like that was also like that big piece, is that if you don't have enough brand equity behind your baseline, how can you expect someone to now want to go try a different form, a different anything within that, if there's no true detail of first, who are you? And I think that that's the other missing part to this for sure.
yeah, and I make sure I'm reading the back because I want to make sure we're not missing something because somebody might then leave a comment and say, you didn't read the back. Well, okay, I'm reading the back. Still, I see nothing that they call out that differentiates this or anything that says why a whip. So
Yeah.
I tell you, if you ask me to give this a grade, it wouldn't be a high grade.
Mhm.
And I'm shocked that a merchant wouldn't look and give that same critique relative to other things that are going in the category. And oh, by the way, you are so high priced.
Right. Right.
So I wish him well.
Absolutely, and definitely same. I think that if they bring it back to the drawing boards, they have a possibility of being able to have some fun innovation within this space for sure. Because I think the whip thing is cool, but they need to go back to the drawing board around the education piece, is what I think we've kind of landed on here. Well, this was so much fun. Yeah, go ahead, Ruben. What'd you have?
I'm sorry, Brian. I just want to. I just got to make one last comment. But James, you hit the nail on the head, right? These guys probably got a shot for one reason and one metric that you talked about earlier, and that's margin, retailer margin, right? Listen, margin to make you do some strange things for some change, and so I'm sure that had something to do with it. While they missed a lot of things, at the end of the day, it was that margin that gave them the shot. Sorry about that, Brian. I just wanted to add that.
No, 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 no. Absolutely. Thank
Well,
you so
one other thing
much.
I'll throw in here on this one. One
Mm-hmm.
other thing I'll throw in this that hit me the minute I saw the product. You can't tell it on the video, but Brianna, you have it in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
For $22, I don't expect a wrap.
No.
I would expect this to be screen printed.
Same.
It really kind of um, cheapens the execution in this
Yep.
instance. For $22, I would expect screen print. So
And on that note, we're gonna go ahead and put this one back on the shelf. I don't know if this is one that we will want to keep and use. So we'll place this one back on the shelf. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode 3. James, we had a great time talking about all things data, talking about shelf testing. I mean, thank you so much for your time.
Happy to be here. I'm glad you guys invited me.
Yes, yes. Please like, comment, and subscribe and follow. We thank you so much for tuning in. And more than anything, James, where can people find you? What are you doing today? Can they follow you on LinkedIn to continue to grab any gems from you?
I don't really publish on LinkedIn, but sure. So just James Ely,
Yep.
easy to find on LinkedIn. And if I do publish anything, they can read it. But
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
all right.
Appreciate it. Bye, guys. Peace.